Shabbos eben.
Shalom, everyone. We are in the last week of Sfiras HaOmer, 1 week before the great Yom Tov of Shavuos, and we are beginning the fourth Chumash, Chumash Bamidbar. And Chumash Bamidbar is, of course, the book of countings, as the English term numbers, because it begins with counting Bnei Yisrael from the age of 20 upwards, and that is Rosh Chodesh Iyar, 1 month after Hakamas HaMishkan, in the second year after they left Mitzrayim. So that is the counting of the Yaitse Mitzrayim. And then in Parshat Pinchas, which is 40 years later, there is another counting of the new generation that will be entering Eretz Yisrael. And even though it's interesting that the total of the two countings is indeed the same, but if you look, you will see that there is changes in the individual Shvatim. So the fact that we have two countings, one at the beginning of Bamidbar and one in Parshat Pinchas, is not so difficult, because they are two different generations. One is the counting of Yaitse Mitzrayim, and the other is the counting of the new generation that's going to be Boi Haaretz. But Rashi points out that in fact there was an earlier counting that the Torah does not mefarsem, and that is when the Mishkan was being constructed, after the forgiveness of the Chet HaEgel with Yom Kippur. So everybody had to give, people from 20 and up, had to give a machzis hashekel. And the machzis hashekels of silver were melted down, and they formed the adonim. They formed the sockets. And in Parshas Pekudei, we are given the total amount of silver of the machzis hashekel, and that indicated the same population of the 603,000 in Bamidbar. So it turns out that instead of just having two countings, one of the Yaitse Mitzrayim and one of the Boi Haaretz, the Yaitse Mitzrayim themselves were counted twice. One after Yom Kippur in the aftermath of the Egel, and two, 1 month after Hakamas HaMishkan. So one might ask a very good question, that is, why is there the need to count the identical population base within a span of 6 or 7 months? We don't know exactly when people gave their half shekel, so it wasn't a single day, but certainly it was after Yom Kippur. So between Yom Kippur and Iyar is only around 6.5 months. What is the tachlis of counting the same generation in around half a year? So Rashi, although Rashi doesn't ask the question, Rashi by implication answers the question, because Rashi says repetitive countings is a sign of God's love, just like a miser counts and recounts his money and his jewels because he's so attached to them, he loves them so much, they're so geschmack. So too Hashem counts and recounts Bnei Yisrael whenever there's a major event. So after the Chet HaEgel, he counts the Jews that are still alive. And when his Shekhinah rests upon us with Hakamas HaMishkan, he recounts. So B'kitzer, Rashi's shita regarding multiple countings is derech chiba. But I would like to suggest, and perhaps this is an amplification of Rashi, that in point of fact, the first counting after Yom Kippur and the second counting after Hakamas HaMishkan Rosh Chodesh Iyar were actually done in two different ways, although it's the same population base. The first counting is very anonymous. People dropped their shkolim in the pushkas, and Moshe and Aaron simply counted the half shekels and computed the population. We don't know, so to speak, how many Ruvains, how many Shimons. There was b'chlal no tribal breakdown. There was no shaykhus at all to individual people. It was impersonal. It was collective. It was anonymous. That was the Minyan Harishain. By contrast, the Minyan Hasheni, at the beginning of Chumash Bamidbar is highly personalized and individualistic. Number one, we have a tribal breakdown. Reuven, Shimon, Levi was not counted in this one. Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun. So it's not just a faceless Klal Yisrael, but individual Shvatim. And number two, the Ramban comments on the phrase Mispar Shemais, narrating a name, a very beautiful thought, that even though the Minyan Hasheni was also through Machzis HaShekel, you didn't drop the coin in a tzedakah box, but you walked by Moshe and Aaron. You gave them Shalom Aleichem. You gave them your name. So at least once in your life you got to meet Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's an important tayeles for the Parshat Yid who needs to have a shaykhus to Moshe Rabbeinu. And it was even necessary for Moshe Rabbeinu. And really for every manig, you can't just be a leader of the nation. You can't just be a leader of Klal Yisrael. In order to be a leader of Klal Yisrael, you have to be someone that's connected to Reb Yisrael. Every single yachid. So this was a big nafkamina between the first counting and the second counting. And the Torah's merames that there's two types of achdus that can exist in Am Yisrael. There is an achdus in which we obliterate differences. Everybody dresses the same. Everybody thinks the same. We don't have different shvatim, different mahalchim, different individuals. We surrender our individuality for the benefit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and for Am Yisrael. We can call that a melting pot type of achdus, in which differences are obliterated. In the aftermath of a catastrophe like the Chet Egel, or in modern times, the Holocaust, that is not a time for people to emphasize their individuality. The Tzorech Hador is so great that you have to put everything aside in order to be mesakein the situation that you're in. But the Torah's merames that is a short-term type of achdus to deal with a state of emergency. But for the permanent hashras shechina in Klal Yisrael, you need a different type of achdus. Not an achdus based on conformity, and not an achdus based on homogeneity, and not an achdus based on obliterating your individuality. But an achdus in which, of course, within the framework of Torah and Halacha, each yachid develops their unique kochos. That's why we have shvatim, because each shevet had its own miyuchadik derech and avodas Hashem. And even within a shevet, every yachid had his derech and avodas Hashem, but mispar shemes. So if the first type of collective anonymous achdus could be called melting pot, the second could be called a salad bowl, in which you have tomatoes and lettuce and peppers and mushrooms and onions. Each has a different color and a different taste and a different texture, but they combine together in a harmonious whole. And you can call it a salad bowl, or you can call it a tapestry, or you can call it a mosaic, or you can call it a symphony, in which the beauty of music is the different notes, not the same note played over and over and over again. And indeed, there's a chazal that says the beauty of a garden lies bedafka when there are different colors of flowers. And that's why we have Ashkenazim and Sfardim, and within Ashkenazim we have Yekis and Polish and Litvaks and Hungarian. And by Sfardim, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Iraq, Syria, and then Taimani. And people sometimes think all of these divisions are chesrenes, when in fact they are the beautiful flowers of a garden that glorify HaKadosh Baruch Hu, provided they are not poisoned with machlokes and animosity. And thus the remez of the two minyanim are progressing from the melting pot idea of community to the salad bowl, mosaic, tapestry type of community, in which a community is based on each yochid developing their kayches and their individual chelik in Torah. As we come to Matan Torah, and as we have to be Ki'ish Echad Uvalev Echad, let us remember to try to appreciate not just the common binds that we have with other Yidden, but to also appreciate individuality and uniqueness in ourselves, in our children, in others. A good Shabbos.